Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, guys. Let's talk some Ohio State football. So, man, how impressive have these Buckeyes been over the last 2 weeks? This Saturday, they go on the road and beat Indiana 51-10, just completely annihilated them like an elite team is supposed to do to a lesser opponent. And this 2019 Ohio State team just feels different to me. They are a more complete team than last year's team was. I don't even think that's even debatable. And people can talk about, well, they haven't played anybody yet, and that's fair. But last year, Ohio State was letting teams like Indiana, teams like Florida Atlantic, and teams like Cincinnati put up huge numbers on them, play with confidence against them. This Ohio State defense is playing at a whole different level in 2019. We already knew the offense was going to be really good. Justin Fields has lived up to the hype so far. J.K. Dobbins and Master Teauge have formed a legit two-headed monster in the backfield. The receivers are great. Special teams has been pretty solid. Hobble did miss a 33-yarder this past Saturday, but overall, Drew Chrisman still doing his thing, in my opinion, the best punter in college football. They've also cut down on the penalties. They're only averaging 5 penalties per game so far through 3 games. It felt like they were getting 10, 12 penalties a game last season. So to me, this is a more complete football team in 2019. They can run the ball, unlike last year's team. They're averaging 270 yards per game on the ground compared to last year, just 170 yards per game. Defensively, they can actually stop teams now. They're giving up 10 points a game right now. Last year, they gave up 25.5 points per game. They're only giving up 235 yards per game compared to last year. They gave up 404 yards per game. One of the worst defenses in the history of the program. But this is a different team this season. And if you want to say they haven't played anybody, wait till they play better teams. Listen to what they gave up to teams last season as far as points. Oregon State, the first game of the year, they gave up 31 to Oregon State, a terrible football team. They gave up 28 to TCU, 26 to Penn State, 26 to Indiana, who they just played and gave up 10 points against, 49 to Purdue, 31 to Nebraska, 51 points they gave up to Maryland, 39 points they gave up to Michigan, 24 against Northwestern, and 23 against Washington. So they gave up points against everybody last year, except for a couple games here and there. Tulsa, and there was one other one that I didn't write down. But to me, this is just a complete football team this year. I think they got a chance to do something special. I think they're one of the 4 best teams in the country because they're a complete football team. Over the last couple years, it feels like Ohio State's been kind of just relying on, well, we're still talented enough to beat anybody. That's still been their fallback. But they weren't playing like a complete team. There was too many things missing. And give credit to last year's team. With all the things that they struggled at doing, running the football, playing defense, penalties, they still went 13-1. They still won the Big 10 championship. They still won the Rose Bowl. That's because Ohio State is so talented. They're going to beat teams that they probably shouldn't because they just have so much more talent. But to me, this year, this team feels like a team that can win a national championship. I don't think last year's team was that good. They just had too many flaws. I think this team this year has a chance to win a national championship. But obviously, we got a long way to go. Much stiffer competition coming up. After this week, we play 4 tough teams in a row. We play Miami of Ohio this week. And then it's at Nebraska, at home against Michigan State. And then a bye week, and then at Northwestern, at home against Wisconsin, and then at home against Maryland. So that's actually 5 games in a row where you play top 25-ish teams for about a month and a half straight. So we'll really find out what this Ohio State team is all about over the next month and a half. But right now, you got to be impressed with what you see. Justin Fields is living up to the hype. They considered this a bad game on Saturday. He didn't play his greatest. He was 14 of 24, 199 yards, 3 touchdowns, with also a rushing touchdown. So through 3 games this year, Justin Fields is completing 70% of his passes. People talk about his accuracy. I think you'll take 70% completion percentage. That's what Dwayne Haskins had last season. He's thrown for 657 yards, 9 passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and he's added 114 yards on the ground with 4 touchdowns. So Justin Fields in 3 games has 13 touchdowns to 0 turnovers. And again, people will say they haven't played anybody. Oh, they should dominate teams like this. Yes, they should. But look at Trevor Lawrence. Widely recognized as the best quarterback in college football. Through his first 3 games, he has 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. These are 2 guys that battled as they came up, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, who was the best in high school. If Justin Fields had 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, he'd be getting crushed right now. But because Trevor Lawrence has already won a national championship, he gets a pass on it. But I mean, just compare the two. 13 touchdowns to 0 turnovers. Trevor Lawrence is 5 to 5. So Justin Fields is playing out of his mind right now. And then the running backs. J.K. Dobbins, another monster game on Saturday. 22 carries, 193 yards, and a touchdown. He also had a receiving touchdown. A little slow week 1, a little disappointing in the first game of the season, but since then, J.K. Dobbins has just gone crazy. His 26-yard rushing touchdown, where he carried half of the Indiana defense into the end zone with him, is one of the most impressive runs I've seen in a long time. And then you got Master Teauge, a guy who has burst onto the scene. Ohio State has a legit number 2 running back now, where if something happens to J.K. Dobbins, this guy, Master Teauge, he can handle a heavy workload. This guy is the real deal. He is a physical specimen. He's in phenomenal shape. On Saturday, 10 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown. He had a nice 40-yard touchdown where he broke away. So impressed by these 2 running backs. But let's give credit to the offensive line. It's a talented group, but it's a young group, kind of inexperienced, replaced 3 starters that went to the NFL. They had a phenomenal game on Saturday. It was definitely their best game of the season so far. They were opening up holes that you could run a truck through. This offensive line is only going to get better as the season gets further along. So you're great at the quarterback position right now. They're great at running back. They have a great group of wide receivers. Chris Olave has really become the leader of this wide receiver group. He's been phenomenal anytime he's got an opportunity. Every time he steps on the field for Ohio State, he just makes big plays. So he's really turned himself into a big-time wide receiver. Ben Victor, another good game on Saturday, 4 receptions, 66 yards. He's been kind of inconsistent during his career at Ohio State, but the first 3 games, he's been solid all 3 games, so that's a good sign for Ben Victor. I think he's finally starting to really figure it out. And then KJ Hill, we know how great he is. He added a touchdown on Saturday. Not only did Chris Olave have 3 receptions, 70 yards, and a touchdown, but he blocked a punt, the same thing he did against Michigan last year. He catches a touchdown, and then he blocks a punt. So this is the thing about Ohio State. Their great position players are also great special teams players. That's really what they teach at Ohio State, so I really love that. Just because you're a great running back or you're a great wide receiver or you're a great this, doesn't mean you still can't play special teams and be elite on special teams. So I love that Ohio State does that, and I'm just such a huge fan of Chris Olave, just a big-time player. But the most important thing for this Ohio State defense or Ohio State team is their defense, obviously. People got to be looking at Greg Schiano sideways right now. Why was this defense so bad last year? They were returning 9 starters. This is basically the same defense as last year. So, you know, it's pretty fair that Greg Schiano got fired. Jeff Hafley, Greg Madison, and Al Washington have come in. They've done a great job with this defense. They've done a complete 180. They look like a completely different defense so far this year. They're only giving up 10 points a game compared to 25.5 points given up last year. So just so impressed by the defense right now. We've known that they have the talent, right? I mean, in the secondary, you got Jeffrey Okudah is going to be a high draft pick. Damon Arnett balling out of control so far this year. That 96-yard interception for a touchdown was a big-time play, man. He caught it while he was kind of spinning, and then it was just too easy. He took off 96 yards, just toyed with the Indiana team. That just looked too easy for him, but he's balling out. You got a Shaun Wade. You got a Jordan Fuller. You got a Brendan White. You got a Josh Proctor. That secondary, 7-8 guys deep of big-time players in the secondary. And at linebacker, the weakest link last year, Pete Werner, Tuff Borland. Obviously, Tuff's got a little bit of an excuse because he was coming off the injury. But Pete Werner did not impress me last year. Neither did Tuff Borland. they're playing like completely different players this year. And then on the D-line, we know how great Chase Young is. We know how great some of these other guys are. Still missing Jonathan Cooper. When he gets back, this D-line is going to be even better. But as a whole, this looks like a complete defense right now. Players, coaches, scheme, everything looks like it's together right now for this Ohio State defense. So to me, they're just a more complete team than they were last year. But we'll see. They got a long way to go. I'm not trying to act like they're the greatest team of all time. After 3 weeks, I've fallen for this type of thing before in the past. Through the first few weeks, I'm like, oh, this is the most talented Ohio State team ever. But I really believe there's something special brewing with this 2019 Ohio State team. So I want to go over some other scores in the Big Ten from this week. It was an ugly, ugly week for the Big Ten. Last week was really good. Most of the Big Ten teams didn't play great opponents, but the Big Ten has looked impressive so far this year, except for this week. Not a great week for the Big Ten. Michigan State loses at home to Arizona State 10-7. This is the problem with Michigan State. They got one of the best defenses in the country, arguably the best. Their defense is nasty. I got to admit that. That defense is legit, but they can't score. They're terrible on offense. I don't see how Michigan State scores a single point against Ohio State this year. I really don't. Their offense is atrocious. They could have tied the game up 10-10 as time expired, but they had 12 men on the field. They had to redo the kick. It got blocked, and they lose 10-7 at home. At the end of the day, all I really care about is what Ohio State does. If Ohio State keeps winning, I'm good. I don't care about anything else. But you want these Big Ten teams to keep looking impressive and keep winning because, now Michigan State, they'll fall out of the top 25. Maryland loses, they're out of the top 25. You don't want these Big Ten teams losing games like this, especially out of conference. It just doesn't look good. So I'm definitely disappointed that Michigan State lost this game to Arizona State because Ohio State loses a ranked opponent now when they play them. And then Maryland, they looked great the first 2 weeks. They made their debut in the top 25, and they get slapped with reality this past Saturday, losing 20-17 to Temple. How do you go from beating Howard 79-0 and then beating Syracuse 62-20, a top 25 team, and then you lose to Temple 20-17? Just doesn't make any sense to me. I thought Maryland was really going to have a great season. Maybe they still will, but big time slip up on Saturday, losing to Temple. Eastern Michigan beat Illinois 34-31. Who the hell cares? We know how bad Illinois is. It's like they're just always going to be terrible. They're probably the most irrelevant team in the Big Ten, maybe outside of Rutgers. And then Penn State. They looked really good the first 2 weeks, albeit against nobody opponents. This week, kind of an ugly game against Pitt. They do get the win, winning 17-10, but not a great performance by Penn State. At the end of the day, a win's a win. That's all that matters. But overall, not a great game for Penn State. Minnesota beats Georgia Southern 35-32. Not a great game for Minnesota. You beat Georgia Southern by 3 points. I mean, really? That just a bad week for the Big Ten overall. Northwestern did get a decent win. They beat UNLV 30-14. But overall, outside of Ohio State pounding the hell out of another Big Ten team, this was a really ugly week for the Big Ten. Next week, we do have a big game in the Big Ten. Michigan goes on the road to play at Wisconsin. Going to be one of the best games of the week. I will take Wisconsin to beat Michigan by a touchdown next week. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to run crazy on that Michigan defense. If Michigan was at home, I'd probably take Michigan in this game. But we know Michigan. We know who they are. Not only do they not beat good teams, Wisconsin's the number 13 team in the country. Not only do they not beat ranked teams like that, but they definitely don't beat good teams on the road. So I will take Wisconsin to beat Michigan this Saturday, but it's going to be a really good game to watch, no doubt about it. Now, the Buckeyes got Miami of Ohio this week. A team that Ohio State beat 42-0 in Cincinnati just beat Miami of Ohio this week 35-13. So, I mean, you do the math there. What should Ohio State beat Miami of Ohio by? Maybe 100. They could basically name the score in this game. Hopefully we get some backups in after halftime. Get Chugginoff, get Gunnar Hoke some more looks, get some other running backs, receivers. Hopefully we can pull the starters early in this game because, like I said, the 5-game stretch coming up after Miami of Ohio is going to be a big test for these Buckeyes. We're going to see what this Ohio State team is really made of the 5 weeks after Miami of Ohio. At Nebraska, at home against Michigan State. After a bye, they go at Northwestern. Then they're at home against Wisconsin. And then at home against Maryland. So it's going to be a huge month and a half for the Buckeyes. If they come and play like they have these first 3 games, they should run through the Big Ten. I mean, honestly, they're easily the best team in the Big Ten. But they got to stay hungry. They got to stay motivated. I think that's been the difference so far this year. Over the last couple of years, as much as I love Urban, he's doing a great job on the Fox broadcast. I hope he doesn't take the USC job. I just see him as a Buckeye. I want him to stay and be involved in the program. I don't want to see Urban go for good. The fact that he retired, it was like whatever, but he's still around the program. Don't want to see him go to USC for good. But over the last couple of years, especially last year, all the Zach Smith stuff happened. Urban was down all year. You know, he was dealing with medical issues, whatever they were. And then also, you know, he was basically depressed from the Zach Smith stuff. So when your leader doesn't have that energy, doesn't have that fire every single game, naturally your team is going to lack a little bit of that fire. But I think with Ryan Day, it's some fresh new blood. Ryan Day's hungry. Ryan Day's motivated to, you know, put his stamp on college football. He's not established like Urban is, so he's working to become established in college football. And I think because of that, he's got a motivated, hungry team. I mean, Justin Fields is playing to prove a lot of doubters wrong. You know, J.K. Dobbins coming off a so-so season last year. You know, he's motivated. This Ohio State defense is extra motivated to prove how good they really were, and that last year was a fluke. So I think this is a hungry football team. I think they got a chance to do something really special this year in 2019, but we will just have to wait and see. Can't wait for the rest of the season to see how it's all going to play out. But that's going to do it for this video. I will be back next week to do a recap of Ohio State versus Miami of Ohio, and then, you know, we can start looking forward to some of these better games over the next month. But that's going to do it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. You guys let me know down in the comment section all your thoughts on this Ohio State team right now. But that's going to do it, guys. I'll catch you later. See you next week, and go Buckeyes.